Hello everybody. Hope that you are all enjoying your extended break. I trust that you're all healthy. Hopefully you all had a good Tet holiday. And I hope that you're finding fun and productive ways to spend your extra spare time, including naturally reviewing your lessons and finding new ways to improve your English. On that note, let's get started with today's lesson. We're going to begin by talking about something very near and dear to my heart, which is sport and exercise. As a matter of fact, in case you're wondering, the picture that you see on this slide is none other than yours truly. Back when I used to live and work in a ski resort called Vail Beaver Creek in the Rocky Mountains of Colorado. Sports that I enjoyed there. Okay, we're going to start off this lesson with some warm-up exercises. I'm going to read some sentences and I'd like you to repeat them. As you do, focus on varying your intonation, emphasizing key words, and using natural pauses to avoid sounding robotic. Let's start with sentence A. During the school year, I go swimming twice a week at the local pool as part of my studies. Okay. Hopefully you've had a chance to repeat that. Let's move on to sentence B. I'm not especially good at basketball, but I really enjoy playing it. Sentence C. Sometimes, when I'm not too busy, I enjoy playing badminton with my father. Now, with that particular sentence, please pay attention to the word sometimes. Notice the ending sound. Sentence D. I've always wanted to try skiing, but unfortunately, there are no ski resorts in Vietnam. Sentence E. On a weekend, I often watch football on TV. Again, just as a reminder, as you say these sentences, make sure that you're emphasizing key words and breaking it up into different chunks. What we want to avoid is saying, during the school year, I go swimming twice a week at the local pool as part of my studies. Okay? So take some time. If you need to practice them again, please do so. Next, moving on in the book, we're going to talk about some vocabulary related to sport and exercise, and this is on page 26 of the speaking book. And when we talk about sport and exercise, naturally we're talking about things like football or soccer, basketball, tennis, volleyball, swimming, badminton, surfing, golf, hockey, table tennis or ping pong, yoga, weightlifting, cycling, aerobics, jogging, skiing, bowling, snowboarding, or maybe martial arts, such as karate or taekwondo. Now, take a look at those activities, and if you can think of some others, if there's something I missed, be sure and include those. And what I'd like you to do is take a minute and classify them according to your preferences, and then say them aloud. Okay? Now, a tip, as you do this, try to share your natural enthusiasm for the things that you do really enjoy, because this will definitely help you improve your pronunciation score. For example, the adrenaline rush that comes from extreme sports, such as skydiving, or maybe snowboarding, surfing, or activities like riding a roller coaster. adrenaline rush. Okay. Moving on. It's also important to remember that when we talk about engaging in sports, we need to use proper collocations. Correct use of collocations is vital if you want to have any hope of getting an IELTS Band 7. Typically, when we're talking about sports and activities, we use words like play for games, for ball sports such as football, baseball, volleyball, basketball, but also golf, badminton, tennis, etc. We use the verb go for when we physically go somewhere to do the activity, or if we have the ability to move around freely. For example, swimming, go to the pool, skiing, go to the mountains, snowboarding, go cycling, hiking, rock climbing, kayaking, etc. And we also use the word do from time to time for various sports and activities. For example, we do aerobics, which is kind of a dance exercise to music. Some people enjoy doing yoga. Others enjoy doing Pilates, martial arts as well. We do. Okay? Quick note, when it comes to weightlifting or other gym exercises, for example, doing work on the treadmill or the Stairmaster, we usually say, I like lifting weights, or I like going to the gym. We don't do or play these exercises. We say, I like to actually do them. I've heard some Vietnamese say, I like playing weightlifting. That is not correct. Okay. I like lifting weights. I like going to the gym. Some people might say, I like working out at the gym. Right, slide. So we're focusing here on part 1 of IELTS speaking. So a couple reminders, some tips for giving better answers in part 1. These questions tend to be very simple, but certainly that doesn't mean that we should give simple answers. We always want to add plenty of detail. How much detail we add ultimately will determine your IELTS band score, or go a long ways towards determining it. How do we add detail? By giving information such as what, with who, where, what time of day, how often, how and when you got started doing something, why you like it or why you don't like it, how it makes you feel. So adding this kind of information, ideally before the examiner asks you to provide it, is a good habit to have, and will help you get a much better band score. Okay? For example, question, what sports do you like to do in your free time? I might say one of my absolute favorite activities is surfing. It's not every day I get the opportunity to go, but I always try to take advantage of the chances I get. There are a couple surf spots in Vietnam, such as Nha Trang and Vũng Tàu, where the conditions can be pretty decent, especially during the storm season. So, really enjoy taking surf holidays to destinations like Indonesia. A friend of mine got me into the sport a long time ago, and I loved it right from the beginning. It's pretty challenging, but there's nothing quite like the feeling of catching a big wave or getting a long ride. Okay? So, take a moment and answer the question, what sports do you like in your free time? Talk about one or several, but do try to give detail, just as I did in this example, just as we talked about in the last slide. Pause the video for a moment, and when you're ready, after you've practiced the answer, move on. Okay, another tip. Remember, we do want to give a direct answer, but a good habit to get into is change the words from the question when possible. For example, if the question is, what do you like to do in your free time? Rather than saying, in my free time, I like to. Okay? It's technically not wrong to say that, but it will get you a lower band score than if you paraphrase the words. For example, what do you like to do in your free time? If I have some leisure time, I often, or when I'm not too busy studying, I really enjoy blah, blah, blah. Okay? So try to be in the habit of always just naturally paraphrasing the words from the question rather than repeating them exactly. Okay? Moving on to page 28 with the book. Hopefully you're following along. We've got some good phrases, useful phrases that are quite helpful when talking about sport and exercise. For example, sports are fun, right? Ideally. And oftentimes we might say something like, I just play for fun. I don't play competitively. I'm not on a team or involved in a tournament. Some people, on the other hand, might say, I'm very competitive. I can't stand to lose. I hate losing, is what we're saying. When we say, I can't stand. Okay? I hate it. And some people are very naturally competitive. Another great phrase to use when we're talking about exercise, we can say, it keeps me fit, or it helps me keep fit. In other words, in good shape, rather than becoming overweight, or worse yet, obese. Okay? So think about, what kind of person are you? Are you somebody who plays sports for fun? Are you somebody who's very competitive and plays sports to win? Or do you do it simply to keep yourself in good shape? Okay? We might also often say that something is a good workout. Okay? For example, playing soccer is a great workout. Playing basketball is an excellent workout. Swimming is a great workout. Another helpful phrase, and this one is nice because it's a little bit less common. We might say that a certain activity is very therapeutic. Therapeutic. Okay? In other words, it's like therapy. It's like a medical treatment. It's beneficial for our physical and or our mental health. And I think that's extremely true of many different types of exercise. It gives us a great opportunity to relieve stress and relax. And take our mind off of our worries. My belief that if you exercise, you'll probably be a better student in addition to staying fit. Moving on. Some words from our vocabulary bank. There are many. Feel free, if you have any questions, to let me know. I picked out a couple in particular. Our first word is arena. Arena. This is a sports venue. In other words, a location where sports events take place. Essentially, it's a stadium, although arenas are often more likely to host indoor sports like basketball or hockey, sometimes concerts, than a stadium would be. Okay? Again, arena, a venue for sports. Another word that's useful is referee. In other words, an official. The person responsible for making sure that the players follow the rules. Okay, everybody say referee. Sometimes the guy that people love to hate. Okay, another word. We're going to look at some words that we use to describe activities. Here's one that is appropriate in this situation. Tough. In other words, if a sport is very challenging. Another synonym we might use is grueling, intense. Okay? Obviously, in this case, it looks like this woman is involved in an extremely tough activity. Climbing a vertical slope was pretty intense, pretty grueling, somewhat dangerous, nerve-wracking to describe some of the emotions these fans are going through. The question I'd like you to answer here: what's the most dramatic sporting event you've ever witnessed? In my case, I was lucky enough to watch a Italian Serie A football match in Milan, Italy, that involved the home team scoring 3 goals in the last 5 minutes to win the match 3-2. Had to be one of the most dramatic sports events, even in the history of this fantastic football club known as Inter Milan. I'll never forget it. So please take a moment and answer the question: what's the most dramatic sporting event you've ever witnessed? Our next word, dynamic. That means energetic, flamboyant. We might use it to describe a person as well as an activity. Lively, bold. Our next question, are you dynamic enough to try extreme sports? Like, for instance, snowboarding, skydiving, or parkour. If you don't know about parkour, I recommend you look it up. It's a sport where people try to move as efficiently as possible, running around the urban environment, climbing walls, jumping across buildings. It's pretty intense. That's called parkour. Slide. Exhilarating. Okay, this word means extremely exciting, thrilling. Okay, we've got a nice shot of a kayaker, and I've got to believe if that person is not exhilarated, I don't know. They must not have a pulse. Okay. So the question is, what's the most exhilarating activity you've ever done? For me, it would have to be snowboarding. Can you think of one that you'd like to do in the future? If you've never really done anything truly exhilarating, maybe there's something you'd like to do one day. Take a moment, answer the question. And when you're ready, let's move on. The word dangerous, we're all familiar with. Make no mistakes. Some sports can be dangerous. Sports injuries are actually a pretty common thing. Some sports more dangerous than others, like motocross. This is a move known as the look-back heart attack. You can see why. Hopefully you don't ride your motorbike like this. But I do have a question for you. Have you ever been injured playing sports? So, talk about it. Give some detail. I was once knocked unconscious while playing soccer. Went to head a ball, and I got there just before somebody else's head. And next thing I knew, when I woke up, people were carrying me off the field, and I couldn't remember anything. Have you ever been injured playing sports? All right, now we're going to practice answering the following questions. Remember, try not to repeat the words from the question exactly, and do your best to give plenty of details in the answers. Take a moment, read the questions, and read the answers. Question number 1. Do you think exercise is important? Question number 2, do you exercise regularly? I hope so. Question 3, do you prefer to exercise alone or with your friends? Question 4, do you enjoy watching any sports, either in person, live, on television, or at the venue, at the stadium? Question 5, what sports are popular in your country? Don't be afraid if you have to use a Vietnamese word, as long as you explain what it is that you're talking about after you use that word. And our last question, do adults and young people enjoy the same kind of sports? And you can talk about Vietnamese people or anybody, as far as I'm concerned. So take a moment and give a good answer to each one of those questions. Try to give plenty of detail. Paraphrase the words from the question. When you're ready, move on. All right. Page 29 of the book, I'm going to talk about adding additional information. And one of the good ways to do that when we're talking about sports is to talk about things like the equipment that is required, whether or not it's easy to play or do. Is it expensive? Things like that. Okay? For example, if we're talking about a sport like table tennis, ping pong, as some people call it, the equipment that we need is a ping pong table, bats, I guess the English call them. In American English we say paddles. And you also need a ball, of course, maybe more than one in case it gets broken. And the verb that we use to describe the sport is play, of course. All right? So, go ahead, think of some other sports that you enjoy or that are common in your country, and consider the equipment that is used. Make sure you're using the right verb to describe the activity and how people engage in it. And for example, ping pong is a great indoor sport as long as you have access to a table. The rest of the equipment is not too expensive. It's fun, and even kids can play it, right? So we might talk about ping pong in that way if we're adding detail. Like or have to talk about. We don't always get to talk about things we like on IELTS. Sometimes we get to talk about whatever the examiner wants us to. All right, so think of 4 other sports, the equipment, and the proper verb. Fill it in part 29 of the book. Okay, I've got some possible answers here that I came up with for football, soccer. You can see the various equipment we use. Ball, goals, we need players, and ideally, you've got to have the proper shoes, what we call cleats, or turf shoes some people wear. For yoga, don't need much, just really the floor, or a space and a mat, and it's something we do. Note for swimming, some people like to wear what we call goggles, to keep your eyes from getting irritated when you swim. I've heard some people call them swimming glasses. Correct terminology would be to say goggles, swimming goggles. Okay, notice as well for badminton, we need a net. Well, technically, if you really want to play in competitive fashion, we need a net. At a minimum, you need rackets, and what's known as a shuttlecock, or birdie, which is the little thing that flies through the air, and a couple of players at least. Okay? For basketball, of course, we're going to need a court. Just like badminton, technically sports like this are usually played on a court. At least 1 or more baskets or hoops, the ball, a couple of players, ideally some proper shoes. These last 2 sports we play. And notice we've got an example below. Part of the reason football is so popular in Vietnam is that it's a sport that just about anyone can play. All you really need is a ball and players, although having a nice grass field, or as the British would say, a pitch to play on with actual goals and proper shoes to wear, makes it even better. Okay. So that might the way we give that answer. Okay, next up, we're going to talk a little bit about pronunciation, namely the letters V and W. Okay, now, I'm hoping that you're all quite capable of pronouncing the letter V properly, especially given that we live in the country of Vietnam. But nevertheless, let's go ahead and talk about the mechanics of the sound. To make the sound for the letter V properly, you need to start by gently biting down on your lower lip with your upper teeth, and then use your voice and breath to make the sound. Let's give it a try. Va. Place your teeth just gently on your lower lip. Va. And then vocalize the sound. Right, next, to make the W sound properly, we start by actually placing our lips together in an O shape, and then begin voicing it as we separate our lips. Okay, let's try it together. Everybody say O. O. I'm sorry, W is the sound that we're looking for, not O. O is the shape. We've got to make wah, wah. Okay? So it's a wah sound. So we start with our lips in an O shape, and we begin voicing it as we separate our lips apart. Wah. Okay? Now, listen and repeat the words you hear. Place them in the correct box. I was going to try to make a fancy slide here where the words rolled one by one as I said them onto the slide, and you had to put them in the right place. Unfortunately, I don't know if I have the technology with my version of PowerPoint. So let's just say these words together. From the column V, we have very, very, volleyball, volleyball, various, various, in other words, a variety of, victory, victory, what we're hoping Vietnam will achieve at their next World Cup qualifying match, and finally, diving, okay, which is, of course, actually could be two different sports, one in a swimming pool where you jump off of a diving board and try to look stylish and elegant as you do so. Or we might be talking about something like scuba diving, another sport I happen to enjoy. Or as some people might say, skin diving or snorkeling. Okay. As a matter of fact, it can also be used to describe, as some of the men in the class might know, the technique used by football players to fake an injury when they're playing the match and they want to get a penalty called or a foul called on their opponent, and they pretend that somebody kicked them or that they suffered a bad injury. We call that diving or a dive, when somebody just pretends that they were fouled. Looking at the wah column, let's quickly run through our words, starting with weightlifting. Weightlifting, or lifting weights, right? Windsurfing. Windsurfing, something I've seen people doing in Mouinet. Whitewater rafting. Whitewater rafting. Win. Win. And finally, Women's World Cup. Women's World Cup. Remember, when we say the word singular, we say woman, one woman, two or more women. And in this case, the Women's World Cup. World Cup of soccer for women. All right, moving on to our next slide. Talking a bit about grammar now. Namely, adverbs of frequency These are extremely useful for adding detail to our answer. Furthermore, they provide a great opportunity to vary our intonation. Okay? It's the kind of word that we usually emphasize, or words like usually, always, often. Okay? It's quite natural to put some extra emphasis on them. Okay? For example, living in Vietnam, I hardly ever get the chance to snowboard anymore. It's only when I'm traveling in a cold place that I have the chance now. Okay, another example, I'm a huge fan of the London football club known as Arsenal. I always make a point of trying to watch them play whenever they have a match. Unfortunately, their match tonight is at 3 a.m., so I'll have to watch the replay. Okay, now what we're going to do, we've got a list of adverbs of frequency, and by the way, you can follow along in the book on page number 30 at this point. And what we're going to do is we're going to put them in the correct location on the time continuum, starting with never, something we don't do at all, versus all the time, something we do every day. Possibly. Okay. So go ahead and take a look at the words. Often, hardly ever, sometimes, a lot, usually, not very often, frequently, always, rarely, quite a bit, occasionally, and once in a while. Take a moment, say those words, and place them in the correct location on the time continuum. You should have something that looks like this when you're done. So at the never end of the scale, of course, we've got rarely and hardly ever. Moving a little more often. We've got not very often, once in a while, occasionally, sometimes. So the higher end of the continuum, often or a lot, frequently, quite a bit, quite often, and finally, always. Take a moment to consider which adverbs of frequency are appropriate for the activities that you enjoy and practice talking about them. Okay? Try to use each one on the list for some activity that you like or don't like, rarely get a chance to do. Okay, next slide. We've got a set of grammar rules on page 30. What I'd like you to do is complete the following exercises after you read the rules by placing the adverb in the correct location in the sentence. The first one has been completed for you. For example, do you play table tennis? And our adverb of frequency is often. We've got two ways we could say it correctly. You could say, do you often play table tennis? Or, do you play table tennis often? Okay. So take a look at the others. Take a moment, complete the exercise by moving the adverb of frequency into the correct place using the rules on page 30. When you're done, on to the next slide. You can check our answers. Number 1, or answer B, I sometimes like watching soccer on television with my dad. You can repeat. I like watching soccer on television with my dad sometimes. Or we can also say, sometimes I like watching. Sentence. Answer C. I rarely watch sports on television. Answer D. My mother and I play badminton together frequently. Or, alternatively, my mother and I frequently play badminton together? And answer E, I go to the swimming pool every week usually. Alternatively, and maybe my preference, I usually go to the swimming pool every week. All right, now let's take a moment, and I'd like you to read and then answer the following questions. Better yet, if you can work with a partner, have somebody who can ask them, take turns. Question A, do you go swimming at the pool very often? Question B, do you watch football on television much? Question C, how often do you go jogging? Question D, do you like going to the gym? Question E, do you play tennis, table tennis, or badminton? And question F, do you like watching sports on television? Now, as you answer each one of these questions, remember to add relevant detail using our WH questions. When, where, with who, how often, why or why not. Don't forget to make sure to vary your intonation. Use natural enthusiasm. Okay? Share the love. Practice more than once answering these questions. The more you practice, the more natural you'll become, the easier it will get to give good answers, the better of your quality of your answers will be, regardless of what the question is that you're being asked. What you'll find is there's carryover each time you practice. So feel free. Ask yourself the question, answer it, try again. Okay? Take several minutes. Practice answering these questions until you feel like you've made some progress. When you're ready, move on. Okay. Here's an example answer. Do you like going to the gym? In my case, truthfully speaking, I've never been a big fan of going to the gym. Lifting weights, doing squats, or similar exercises have always seemed like a chore to me. And I'd much rather do an activity that I really love, like playing soccer, volleyball, surfing, or snowboarding. Because I find when I do something because I love it, rather than just for the exercise, I'm much more likely to keep at it, and consequently, I've always kept myself in good shape as well. The exercise is a bonus rather than the reason. So what you'll notice here with this answer, I did several things. I used some idiomatic language. I've never been a big fan. Talked about in detail what it is about the activity that I don't like. It's a chore. And rather than just saying, no, I don't like going to the gym, I've suggested why and what I'd rather do instead that's more appealing to me. And that I can get the same benefit from doing it. In fact, maybe I even benefit more health-wise than I would from just doing an exercise routine that's boring to me by finding things that I enjoy. So take a moment, pause the video if you need to, give some nice detailed answers. We've got a bonus high-level sentence here incorporating a variety of collocations, discourse markers, and idiomatic language, which I've color-coded for you to give you an example of how we incorporate them. Okay? I went with one that all of you should be able to incorporate into answers. If I remember correctly, all students at the University of Law take swimming classes. So let's look at a possible answer to the question, do you like exercising? I I enjoy swimming for a variety of reasons. First off, because it's a fantastic, low-impact, full-body workout. Plus, in a tropical country like Vietnam, it feels so refreshing to jump into the cool water on a hot, humid day. Best of all, it's not very expensive, which is great when you're a student who's on a tight budget. Or, alternatively, we might say, best of all, there's a pool conveniently located right around the corner, or just a stone's throw away from my apartment. Okay? So hopefully that gives you some ideas how to really give a nice detailed answer, use some collocations, use some idioms, use discourse markers to organize your answer. And notice as well that when we use those discourse markers, we tend to emphasize them a little bit as well each time you use a discourse marker. So it should be good for your pronunciation as well as your fluency and coherence. All right, now we're going to talk about, speaking of fluency and coherence, that's the key idea on page 31 as we're talking about speaking task 2. I trust all of you remember that during speaking task 2, you'll receive a cue card with information about what to talk about and some specific prompts that you should try to follow. Your job is to try to speak for 1 to 2 minutes, ideally as close to 2 minutes as you can. You do have 1 minute to make some notes prior to speaking. So they've listed a couple of prompts for us on page 31. Before we attack those, what we're going to do is look at some advice for better task 2 answers. Starting off, making notes in our 1 minute. Keep in mind that 1 minute passes very quickly. So what you don't want to do is spend too long trying to decide what it is you're going to talk about. Trust your instincts. Just choose whatever it is you feel like will be easy for you to talk about, and then you've got plenty of details. Okay? Also, we want to use that 1 minute wisely in terms of the kind of notes that we make. So first of all, you've got to avoid writing complete sentences. There's just not enough time. And instead, use keywords. Don't bother with easy to remember information. Okay? For example, do you like exercising if you're talking about swimming? I wouldn't bother writing down swimming. You're not going to forget, right? What you should try to do instead with the time that you have, and remember this is the only time you've got time to really think about what you're going to say. So therefore, try to remember some less common but appropriate vocabulary or collocations. Think of some idiomatic language. Jot it down. Jot down some phrasal verbs that will help you remember to use the appropriate verb tense. This is a very common mistake in part 2, using the wrong verb tense. So make sure you do that. Don't forget to think about how you're going to finish up so that you can do it smoothly and skillfully rather than very abruptly and awkwardly, which is the way a lot of students tend to do it, with a long, uncomfortable pause, a blank look, and maybe before blurting out, "I'm done." Okay, think of a much better way that's more elegant to finish your answers. We'll talk about that in a minute. For example, if I were talking about a common task, for example, talk about your most recent vacation, my notes might look something like this. I might write flew, past tense phrasal verb on Vietnam Airlines. Maybe some keywords like my son loves flying, no monitor, good food, direct flights, broaden horizon. Okay? You can also use shorthand. I recommend it to save time. When surfing, all-time fave. WC waves, exhilarating. Batik shopping, got off the beaten path. That's an idiom. Visited. Notice these past tense phrasal verbs. Okay? And then some nice vocabulary. Spectacular, pristine, picturesque. Okay? A couple other things. Words like cuisine, ethnic foods, another idiom, an arm and a leg. And finally, a reminder how to finish the talk. I like the phrase all in all. It's a really nice way to finish, kind of sum up whatever you've been talking about, provided you have time. Okay? Let's look at an example. Wait, when it's time to begin, very important to remember, always introduce whatever it is that you're going to talk about. How do you do that? I'm going to tell you about, I'd like to tell you about, something like that. Okay? Very simple. Make sure it's part of your routine. Why? Because few things are less coherent than a speaker telling a story to a listener who has no idea what that speaker is talking about. Okay? That is a sure way to kill your fluency and coherence score by not introducing your story. Okay. We mentioned before you want to try to paraphrase task words. In task 1, guess what? You want to do the same thing in task 2. Okay? For example, talk about a recent vacation you took. Don't say, I'm going to talk about a recent vacation I took. No. We should say something like, okay, I'm going to tell you about a trip my family and I made to Indonesia over Tet holiday just last month. Or, I'm going to share with you the story of a holiday that I took not long ago to blah, blah, blah. Okay? Paraphrase, paraphrase, paraphrase. This is important for our lexical resources score. Another key point, try to provide a bit of detail about each bullet point that you get with the prompts. Otherwise, what you'll find is it may be very difficult to continue talking for anywhere close to 2 minutes. For example, talk about a recent vacation you took. You should say where you went, who you went with, how you got there, and whether or not you enjoyed the vacation. All right? The wrong way to go about doing this would be to say something like, I'm going to talk about a recent vacation I took to Bali. I went with my family. We went by airplane. Okay? This fails to use paraphrase or intonation in that case, and because no real detail is added, what it does, it kills 3 bullet points in about 10 or 15 seconds, and it means you've got still 1 minute and 45 seconds left to go, but really only 1 bullet point to work with. Good luck trying to make it 2 minutes in that case. So a better way, try to add lots of detail about each and every bullet point. For example, I'm going to tell you about the trip my family and I took to Indonesia just last month over Tet holiday. We usually travel internationally over Tet to avoid the crowds and high prices and poor service during that time in Vietnam. Most of all, we just really enjoy experiencing different cultures. Such a great way to gain new perspectives and broaden your horizons. So what you'll notice that I did there is, just created detail that kind of randomly, but at the same time it's relevant to, a vacation, kind of the why. Why did I go there? What was my motivation? Why not stay in Vietnam? So it's still relevant. You don't have to necessarily do it just this way, but just to give you an example. Okay, continuing on. We flew to Bali on Vietnam Airlines. My 3-year-old son, who I hope you can't hear in the background, loves absolutely everything about flying, including just riding in the taxi to the airport, and of course, looking at and being in airplanes. Luckily, we were able to book a direct flight, and though we hit a bit of turbulence before landing, which though my wife and son didn't like, I actually kind of enjoyed it myself. Unfortunately, there were no monitors in the seat to watch a movie, but since it was a direct flight, it was relatively short, and the food they served was good. As far as Bali, it was amazing. We spent the better part of the week at a charming little beach town called Canggu. I guess the locals call it the Goo. And the thing is, when you travel, especially for surfing, getting good surfing conditions can sometimes be the luck of the draw. But fortunately, the waves were really nice each day. And of course, surfing is one of my all-time favorite sports. And Indonesia is actually renowned for having world-class waves most of the time. Fortunately, it didn't disappoint. In this case, taking on powerful waves like that is an incredibly exhilarating experience that I hope you all get the chance to do one day. But another one of my favorite parts of the trip was the serenity and the pristine nature that we were able to enjoy. Now, naturally, we did some tourist activities like visiting one of the gorgeous local temples and a sacred monkey forest, eating delicious ethnic foods and local cuisine, which is also very tasty. But we also like to get off the beaten path a little bit. For example, we hiked through a forest in the middle of nowhere to a spectacular waterfall. And we also visited an incredibly picturesque group of rice terraces where the only thing you could hear was the sound of birds singing and falling water. Such a massive contrast from polluted and chaotic Ho Chi Minh City. Best of all, activities like the ones we prefer are really cheap in Bali, unlike a lot of tourist destinations where you have to pay an arm and a leg for everything you do. All in all, the combination of being able to get away from the big city and relax in nature, take in some incredibly beautiful scenery and enjoy really delicious international food, along with being lucky enough to enjoy some great waves every single day, really made for an unforgettable experience. What was even better was being able to do all these things without spending much money. Now, you'll notice in this case how well this last paragraph that I said here kind of wraps up a lot of the key details from earlier in the speech. Let's paraphrase, right? It's a very coherent way to finish your talk when you do that. Kind of ties everything together from beginning to end. Reminds the listener of your key points. And obviously it's much better than just finishing abruptly without wrapping up at all, if you have the time remaining. And it gives you the chance to speak extra rather than just speaking for a minute and a half or so. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a good idea. In terms of these slides, in terms of these recordings, they're just examples, and I wouldn't necessarily give this exact answer, and it might end up being a little bit more than 2 minutes if I did. But what I'm trying to show you is just how to add detail on answers and give you some ideas how to do that. In fact, in this case, I think I ended up leaving a few things off my notes just because I ran out of time, or I would have run out of time, I'm sure, had I tried to talk about everything. So one other thing I'd recommend is as you practice, get an idea, what is 2 minutes eventually you'll see, you'll get a feel for 2 minutes, and you'll know, okay, it's about time to start wrapping up my talk at this point. Okay? But if you're in the middle of a test and you find yourself given an answer and you run out of things to say, don't forget to look back at your notes. Did I miss anything? Don't forget to double check the bullet points, and then make sure and summarize. One other useful technique that works well sometimes, but I want to remind you guys, is you can read one or more of the bullet points out loud. For example, one of them was, who did you go with? So you just ask yourself a question out loud. Who did I go with? On this occasion, I traveled with my family. How did we get there? Naturally, given a long distance, we took a flight. Blah, blah, blah. Did I enjoy it? Absolutely. Bali was amazing. Right? Something like that. So, when you do that, it actually uses up a little bit of extra time. And even better than that, what it can do is, first of all, following the bullet points is a really good idea, because it will kind of keep you logically developing your ideas more coherently. And by reading the bullet points aloud, one or more of them, it actually acts as a transition between ideas, which is another important part of getting a good score, is making smooth transitions between ideas. That's why we use discourse markers. And in this case, reading the bullet point out loud is kind of like using a discourse marker to signal, here's the next idea. All right, so keep that in mind. Try it, practice it, and use it once in a while. All right, now it's your turn. So what I'd like you to do is make notes using relevant keywords to the task on page 31, and then practice giving the talks. Okay? As you do so, time yourself and make sure you're utilizing the techniques that we've talked about in this lesson. Paraphrase, give lots of detail, use good intonation, use your natural enthusiasm, things like that. Record yourself, given the talk, take a video, and make sure, you can use your notes, of course, but I don't want you to read off a script, right? When you're done, send me an email. My email address is here, and I will have feedback for you.